you'd like to contact the show, send us an email at liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com or get involved in the conversation on social media. Join the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at liveonfourlegspod.
There's some requests for songs. There's a few we don't know yet. Hunger Strike, Chris ain't here tonight. Can't do that. You, we haven't figured out yet. There's a sign that says Eddie Lewinsky. I don't know what the fuck that means. That's my intern there. After the show. Interns, they don't get paid, they just do it for the experience. And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking Cameron in the drum. Mr. Boom Gasper. You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, the definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. Today we are doing a show from 1998, Noblesville, Indiana. Or maybe it's Indianapolis, Indiana. That's not a conversation that we need to have, but this is the first show from the second U.S. leg in 1998, which is a very important leg. We can get into a little bit about that and what would happen more on the East Coast, but this is very interesting that they're starting a leg in Indiana here, which is a part of the country that we've never talked about before. So I'm interested in getting into it. This is an interesting era to talk about because we don't talk about it too often, yet this year we're going to be talking about it a lot more. So there's a lot to discuss. Let's do it all in one episode. Randy Sobel over here, John Farrar over there.
Hello, hello.
Yo, so you have a strong feeling about 1998 because this was the year that you went to your first show.
That's right. Yeah, when I was 20, I was kind of like talking myself out of Pearl Jam at the time, like getting more into like punk rock, and I was in a band at this point and all that. And it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of their last gasp. This is kind of like, I'm going to be kind of moving on. I'm not really into them anymore. And like, it would take a few years before I really got back into it. But every time we do a show from this year, it always brings back good memories because they're still like in their prime. It's the 90s, but it's late 90s. It's not like the angsty 93, 94, 95 shows. They're starting to kind of grow up a little bit and mature, but they can still pull out that fire when they need to. And a lot of these shows are great, underappreciated gems that nobody talks about, and I think we got another one here.
Yeah, I fully agree. Look, again, I mentioned that Indiana is not really part of the country that we go back to too often. There have been shows there, a couple of shows there, a couple of pretty good shows there, but also, like, that's not where a lot of big things have happened before. So when somebody brings this up and says, why don't you cover this show? We're like, okay, this is different. This is something brand new for us to sink our teeth into. And we have Jeremy Curtis to thank for that this week because this was a Patreon request. This comes directly from Patreon, and we can talk about that if you want to request an episode a little bit later in the show when we do our whole what's going on Patreon spiel. We'll tell you how to request a show. But Jeremy Curtis is nice enough to request this one, and this has been on the board for a little while, and we made sure that it got pretty early into 2022 because, again, 1998, something that we wanted to hit some more shows up, and we wanted to hit up this territory. So if you're from the area, you got something. It's great. It's great that certain local areas get recognized, and we want to get to pretty much every single one in the US, and maybe overseas we'll get to some different ones as well. So let's tell Jeremy's story here, because this is very interesting. Look, when you think about the way that the band is live, they can sometimes cement their impact on you, and I think that's what happened here. You be the judge on this story. I'm just going to read it, and then we can react to it. So, how many people can honestly say when a particular band becomes their favorite band? For me, it's easy. August 17th, 1998. The band, Pearl Jam. Up until that point, and for the last 8 years or so, my favorite band was Aerosmith. In 1990, my brother gave me an Aerosmith pump on cassette that changed my life. It opened me up to music that I didn't even know existed. From then on, I was 100% a rocker. On August 17th, 1998, that baton was passed from Aerosmith to Pearl Jam. I was 17 and just about to start my senior year of high school. My friend Mike and I decided to go on a road trip, traveling 2.5 hours to Deer Creek Music Center in Noblesville, Indiana, a suburb of Indianapolis. This was my first real road trip out of state at that. Having recently landed a job at our local Target, I finally had a few dollars scrapped together. The ride over from Champaign, Illinois was nothing worth noting. We were, however, pretty naive and pulled over on the exit from the interstate that leads us to the venue at the first ticket scalper we saw. $65 a piece later, and we had lawn seats. Ooh, that's pretty expensive for long seats in 1998. And right now, I mean, that's a bargain, but pretty expensive for back then. I don't even know if the show was sold out. There was probably lawn seats available at the box office for half of what we paid. Since we paid as much as we did, unfortunately, I did not have more money for merch. What was interesting was, as we were doing the transaction, we saw somebody get rear-ended pretty badly right in front of us. I'm not a doctor, but it probably required a hospital trip. The remaining trek to the venue was uneventful. We arrived early enough to see the opening act, Iggy Pop. I had heard of him, but not know any material. I would say that neither did the rest of the crowd. That's going to be a point we get into.
Yeah.
The main thing I remember about Iggy was his relentless attempt to get a rise out of the crowd. He must have called us fuckers 100 times to no avail. Eddie must have watched the show because the first thing he said as Pearl Jam took the stage was something like, "Okay, fuckers, it's our turn." I have a bootleg of the show, however, the audio is so bad that I hardly ever listened to it. I hadn't in years. The following is going off of pure memory. After the opener, Long Road, which at the time I did not know, the next 5 to 6 songs included probably 3 or 4 of my favorite songs at that time period. Hail Hail, Brain of J, Last Exit, Given a Fly, and Corduroy. For 1998, this setlist was one epic song after another. Being 17, I hadn't discovered a taste for alcohol, so I was as sober as a priest on Sunday for this concert, meaning I didn't have to take a restroom break. I was 100% in tune with the whole experience. Boy, did that change just 2 years later at the same venue for what would be the next time I saw Pearl Jam. I really took everything in. I do remember being somewhat offended before they played MFC, saying that the best way to get out of Indiana may not be a tractor. I remember Eddie dedicating Nothing Man to all the poor people in the back, and I felt this was 100% dedicated to me. Shortly after that, I remember them playing Spin the Black Circle, my favorite song at the moment at the time. Lastly, I remember them playing a song called Leavin' Here, which I actually had heard of at the time, and being blown away that they would play something like that. I haven't looked it up, but I wonder how many times they played it live. Well, look, I can look it up because that's easy for me. 77. 77. Non-Pearl Jam related, I'd like to end by sharing the following story. As we sat for what seemed like hours in the parking lot after the show, there was a large praying mantis, by far the largest I've ever seen, sitting on the driver's side mirror of my friend Mike's Saturn. The thing was huge. I'm talking near alien size. We weren't moving at all, and this thing was just staring at us. Mike was driving and had his mirror down, and we had discussed what his move would be. After probably 15 minutes, still sitting, it made its move right into the chest of my friend Mike. It was a good thing he was in park because he freaked out so much that he floored the gas pedal. I still remember that vividly. Well, There are some things that look. I think that even more so than songs being played, you just kind of remember those moments that are just like those what the hell kind of moments, like almost like a TV show or movie moment. Like what the hell do you do when something silly like that happens? But you came out of it alive, and good for you. Thank you, Jeremy. Great story, great stuff, and a lot of obviously what you talked about is a lot of what we're going to talk about. And I think the way I want to piggyback off of what you were saying is just following up on that Iggy Pop was the opener for this. And on first view for me, I think, wow, that's awesome. I love the Stooges, I love Iggy, and honestly, this is a perfect time that John and I are covering something with Iggy because we're actually doing the Stooges pretty soon for deprogram. So this is kind of we're in the zone for him right now.
Yeah,
So
that'll be fun. Yeah.
yeah, one thing that I want to bring up, and he mentioned it here, is that Iggy got no reaction. You know, this guy had been around. He's a legend in the punk rock world, and I mean he's a great live act. He's a personality, and you'd think like you kind of draw that in with the crowd, but that crowd, that '90s crowd, that just wasn't feeling kind of the '70s punk vibe, I guess. They didn't buy into it, and I find that weird in retrospect because I see him as such an enormous personality to get behind.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit when we did the Crocodile Cafe show with Cheap Trick, and like Iggy Pop in 1970 and 1973, even later on when the Stooges got back together, like yes, and of course the man's a legend, but in 1998 it's like, really? He's still around? Like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, old man, show us what you got, I guess. Well, okay, whatever. But like it doesn't have the same kind of panache because it was just a different time and like people were just kind of over it. Like what was Iggy Pop doing in 1998? He's probably most known for that Candy song with the I think it was Kate from the B-52s or something, like, kind of cheesy. Like people knew him from like VH1, like it's like, all right, cool. And I like, was he even doing Stooges songs? Like, I don't know,
He
probably.
was. I
Yeah.
I actually looked it up. He was
Okay.
doing, I Want to Be Your Dog, and he was doing
Okay.
Search and Destroy. He was doing the normal stuff that you would expect him to do, but
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was also doing his own stuff. He'd cover Louie Louie, and he'd do Wild
Sure.
One. He would do The Passenger, and like that's pretty
It's
normal
again
stuff
for
for him.
like a bunch of teenagers. It's like, oh right, old dude. I'm not saying he's not a legend. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. It's just a different time. Just this young Pearl Jam crowd was just kind of like, I'm just guessing, and Jeremy was there. He kind of hinted at this, but like, who? I'm sure they would have preferred someone a little younger.
Yeah, and most of the openers at that time were kind of like you mentioned Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick opened up a couple shows on this leg, and Mudhoney, who's not like Spring Chickens, they're not like a
Yeah.
brand new fed. And so, later on they would invite Slater Kinney, My Morning Jacket, Kings of Leon, and those kind of bands.
Red Leo, Mercy Devils, younger
Right,
kind of
Band
bands.
of
Yeah.
Horses, right,
Yep.
exactly. They would invite all of those bands into the fold, and some of them even kind of picked up some momentum after they opened up for Pearl Jam. But here it seems like they're inviting a bunch of bands that they want to watch because apparently during this whole entire tour, the band, especially Mike and Ed, were just planted on the side stage watching the entire time. Which, I mean, look, you can do it, go for it. Absolutely. I find that interesting that they would go in that direction, but I think that's always we talked about the Rolling Stones when they opened up for the Rolling Stones, and the Rolling Stones were looking for that younger band to bring in the younger generation, and Pearl Jam was like, well, we have the younger generation. Let's kind of get them to kind of recognize what
Yeah.
has influenced us.
Yeah. Let's try to educate some people. Give these people a little rock and roll history.
So this is, I think we mentioned it before, the first night of the tour, and it's an important leg in 1998. They're obviously going to hit up a lot of the East Coast stuff, and this is going to be the Breath Tour, and this is going to be the Madison Square Garden show, and that's kind of an important turning point for the band in their history. But right here to kind of open up and look, they're starting out in Noblesville, Indiana, which feels a little bit random, but I think that's kind of cool that they can kind of just drop in the middle of the country and then kind of go forward instead of starting at one end and then finishing off at home or something like that. I think that's kind of cool that they plan it out this way.
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of the band All, which I know you know.
Of course.
Their story was they put a pin in the geographical middle of the United States and moved their operation there so they would be close to everything. So it's kind of like drop us in the middle and we'll work our way around. These long tours, they were going everywhere, so might as well start. You got to start somewhere. Start in the middle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that also kind of gives this kind of crowd that probably is what I think there was one Indianapolis show in 1992, but they haven't seen them since. I don't think there was one in 96. They were pretty much hugging the East Coast line, and I don't think there was definitely not anything in 95. I am not sure about 94, but I don't think so. So it'd been a long time since they've been there, so it's kind of a, just drop right in the middle and play not just a venue but a city that they really haven't experienced too much. So
and also it's the first night, so if there's a little rust, if there's some growing pains, and they got a new drummer, which we're going to talk about, then you're not opening up in Madison Square Garden like a big spotlight on you. You're not opening up in Boston. You're not opening up
Seattle,
in LA or Seattle or something. If they have an off night in Noblesville, then it's not the end of the world. Word's not going to get around that like, oh, Pearl Jam had an off night and people aren't going to go. It's not going to be a big like deal.
Right. All right, fuckers. It's their turn now. You get the classic chord ringing out for the uphill climb version of Long Road. And what do I mean by uphill climb? It starts out kind of mild and just keeps building to those big moments. I kind of love, and we talked about it with Release a couple of weeks ago, I love when, you just kind of have that calm before the storm and then you can just bust and break out. And I think that this was a perfect way to really open up this tour and to kickstart things into gear. And yeah, they had to start slow at this show because the next three are going to be wild at the gate.
I always think it's funny when they open up a tour with Long Road. Like, is he doing this on purpose? But yeah, it's a very good version. The only thing I think at one point someone hits a wrong chord and it kind of throws Ed off a little bit. They have to kind of like.
I didn't notice that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the middle somewhere. Someone hits like a wrong note, but they recovered. Just like I can just picture them like Ed throws a look at someone, or maybe it was him, But they pick it right back up. But it's the one song opener, and then you're full speed ahead.
One of the themes that we're going to end up talking a lot about in the show is that the drums just sound really percussive, really heavy, and not that it's just an unofficial bootleg and usually you do get heavy drum sounds on it, but it sounds like Matt went back, during this time from the first leg where he was really just kind of a replacement drummer for a little while, a damn good replacement drummer, but now he's felt more acquainted with the band and knows the songs a little better, so he has kind of a mojo going now. And if anybody was out to impress at the show, it was absolutely Matt Cameron.
Oh yeah, and they had a few weeks off after the first leg, and normally you would think like, oh, okay, they'll like go back to Seattle and kind of chill out and like hang out with the girlfriends or the wives. I don't think they had families yet at this point, but we'll just kind of chill out. We'll maybe like relax a little bit. But I don't think that happened between these legs. I think they were probably practicing every night. At least I'm sure Matt was. I'm sure he was on the phone with guys. Let's go. I want to learn more. Like, we gotta go. So I picture them like really working hard during that off time, and especially him wanting to hit this leg really, really hard. Not just to prove to himself and to prove to the band, but prove to the fans. Like, Pearl Jam is an established band. He doesn't want to be the one to let it down. So yeah, I'm sure he worked his ass off for these few weeks to try to like nail these songs, and he just comes out firing on this one. Like, almost all my notes are like, wow, Matt's really good on this. And there's a roll in the middle of Hail Hail that he starts, and you're just like, oh, there it is. He's got it. He's on it. It's I can picture it as just being such a good feeling to have him behind the drums and know that it's going to be solid. It's going to be stable. We got somebody back there that we can go and just let everybody go off and do their thing.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Like, go off and do his own thing. I think there was a lot of, on the first leg, just kind of waiting it out and seeing what song kind of came to him and what songs that he was sort of picking up from Jack and kind of taking a little bit of what Jack did. And it feels like here that he's really coming into his own and he's becoming Matt Cameron, the Pearl Jam drummer, instead of a Pearl Jam drummer. So I think that's important to note.
Yeah, it's the confidence. We talk about sometimes he was real tentative on that first tour, and like he even says it in the movie. Like they would call it a song and be like, "All right, do I know this one? Okay." But now, like you can just feel the confidence coming from behind the drum kit. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I don't imagine a world where I can't see an unconfident Matt Cameron. Like, that's his personality, that it just kind of vibrates from him, that he's cool, he's collected, almost borderline, like, cocky confident, but he's not a dick about it. And I think the way that the band always makes a note to say, like, Matt Cameron essentially saved them. And you can say that about two drummers because they've said that about Jack Irons as well. So this is not the last time we bring up Matt Cameron. And essentially these three right here, Hail Hail, Brandon J, Last Exit, are all scorchers. And yeah, Matt is a highlight in all of these. And honestly, Ed too, you think about first night of the tour, Ed, his voice is rested up and it's in good shape and he's ready to jump on everything right away. Hail Hail, his voice is right on top of it. Brandon J, he's accelerating it, has the growl in full force. Same with Last Exit. Like, you get that big scream at the end of Last Exit too.
Yeah.
Like, this is one heck of a 3-song combo. I really, like, I can't think of three to come out and hit you right at the beginning of the show that are better than this, and probably you have never gotten these three together after this era.
Ooh, yeah, few and far between.
Probably Hail Hail with Last Exit, but Brandon J is sort of the outlier after 1998.
To your chagrin.
Unfortunately, but you know what? That's why we get to cherish these 1998 shows and go back to them, because you do get to kind of have them at this raw and most favorable moment. But that's essentially what this is right here. The solo in Brandon J was phenomenal, and like there's, I don't know if you noticed it, but it happened in Brandon J. Ed kind of has this like excess yell after a line, just an extra emphasis that he was ready to go on it, that he was feeling good. Like, you could feel that energy coming back on the bootleg.
there's that feeling, we talk about sometimes where when everything's going well, it can kind of lift everybody up, and you kind of get that energy of just like, we're in the zone right now. Nobody can do any wrong. Like, everything's just hitting on full force, full cylinders. Every song they just nail it, got it. And they're just in the zone with this one. It feels really good. And again, first night of tour, they're confident, they practice, they know what they've got in Matt Cameron. They're just going to go out and destroy these audiences. So I almost say it every episode. You always know how Ed's feeling. And when he does those, when he lets out those little, extra yelps and hollers, then, he's in a good mood.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get out of that, three-headed trio there into Given a Fly and Corduroy, which look, think about this. And in this era, let's say 2022 wasn't an album tour. It was just a tour, just have Pearl Jam on the road. They didn't have to promote Gigaton or anything else. Pick a better 6 songs to start your show with.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
I don't think you can. Right. And obviously, looking on it now, they're all 90s songs, but even so, a lot of these stick around in these spots. Given a Fly right after kind of a big scorcher of a section, then Corduroy to finish it all off was really great end capper of all this. And what I want to bring up about Given a Fly is going back to Cameron. This is probably the most difficult imitation of Jack that he has, and basically has to take it and interpret it into his own, because Jack had such a unique take on Given a Fly. But his version of sort of the tribal beat is very interesting. I want to get your take on it, because we did talk about it a little bit in the Evolution episode, but it feels like this version, he was really hitting on something pretty hard.
Jack was very much about the feel and very much about the rhythm, and Matt is more about the power. He does something on this song that's really special. It really changed it in a good way, and I think it gives the song a little more power, and it could have gone a little more like the way of In My Tree, and not that that's a bad thing in my opinion, of course, but it became something different with Matt behind the kid. And the part where it switches, like when everything kicks in that second chorus, it just hits harder than I don't think it never did with Jack. And it's just, it's great. It just took the song to another level. I think it really made people sit up and take notice.
You mentioned In My Tree. I think that's the other comparison there that are probably the two most notable Jack moments. And think about those two songs moving forward, what they would do with both of them. Given a Fly would get a little bit faster and kind of go upwards in progression because of Matt. And In My Tree would become something totally different in a couple of years after this. So
they kind of had opposite trajectories after this.
Mm-hmm.
He never was able to really translate In My Tree like he did this one, and nowadays he kind of does a Jack impression on In My Tree.
Thankfully, we don't have to see anybody have to imitate some of Matt's really good stuff, but I think that we sort of at times can take it for granted, because we have Matt imitating Dave, we have Jack imitating Dave, we have Matt imitating Jack, but we don't have anybody imitating Matt. And I think that's where we get a little bit jaded with that, because if that ever were to happen and you look at it, you'd be like, whoa, what Matt does on this is really freaking impressive.
Oh yeah, he's almost inimitable. There's no one alive that could do an impression of Matt Cameron and make it sound as good as he does.
Right. He's, like they said all the time, he's a Lamborghini, he's a machine. It's very, very tough to replicate. I do want to hit on Corduroy just for a little bit, because Corduroy, I feel like 1998 was just Corduroy was the breakout star of 1998, and that's not to disparage anything that happened from 1994 through 1996, because Corduroy was still a good song. But I think in the sense of, think about a song like An Unthought Known, and that's the first one that comes to my head. When they start playing it live, it's not a radio song. You have to get used to it, and then you hear it a couple times. You're like, whoa, that's good. And then a year goes by, the next time you see him, you're now excited for this song. It becomes a highlight for you, not just a highlight, but a moment that you're saying before the show, I want to see this song. And I feel like in 1998, Corduroy maybe across the board were so many people's pick to want to hear, and especially what they were doing with it, mixing in sort of the Beds Are Burning and the Interstellar Overdrive intros and some of the other things that they were doing. Corduroy felt like it had a turning point in 1998.
Oh yeah, there were 3 songs that they played every single night: Given to Fly and Wishlist and Corduroy. And
I think Hail Hail was one of them too, to be honest.
They missed one.
Oh wow, okay.
But yeah, Corduroy, I mean, it was opening up at this time, and a lot of that is due to Cameron. Like, when that happens, it kind of becomes that anthem, that really powerful live song. And yeah, I agree. This is 98 and live on 2 legs. A lot of people back to that version.
It's a great version.
Like, oh my God, just breakout, star. And going back to Cameron too, just comes in like rolling thunder on this. Like, just at the very beginning, after Ed plays that riff and the drums come in, it's just like, whoa, okay. There's a really nice build before the solo happens. You really tell that like there's some tension there and there's some power behind that. It sounded very, very good. I love this version.
Crowd's getting behind it too, and that's during that moment right before the solo kind of erupting into the end, where the crowd starts clapping and they can kind of develop their own crowd and response moments out of this. Like, that's when the song kind of takes a turn and becomes bigger than you'd ever expect. Corduroy is definitely a highlight from this. There's going to be a lot of Vitalogy album highlights, so Corduroy is absolutely in the middle. All right, Ed mentions, I think we mentioned it when we were reading Jeremy's letter, but if you ever want to get out of here and further your boundaries, the best way to get out of here is not by tractor, but if a tractor is all you have, go for it. And that gets you right into the tractor driving song MFC.
There's some pandering for you. We've been talking about pandering a lot. There's some pandering for you.
Right. I mean, you can change the lyrics to MFT if you want. Mini fast tractor. I don't know if John Deere has that in storage or not, but I mean, this is just right in the pocket. The drums popping on it. The guitar's very atmospheric. We haven't covered MFC in a while, so longtime fans will know that I have to bring this up. Of course, gnawing,
yeah,
because there's gnawing every single time, but we haven't heard it in a while, so it's good. I think it's a nice refresher to just bring it back and celebrate the moment. The one thing about this version of MFC, this is my I Am Mine treatment, where this could go on for so much longer and just stops, and I could have gotten 2 more minutes out of just like jamming and getting some like electric atmospheric sounds, Matt kind of rolling drum beat, and just keep going with it, and they don't.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I know this was the leg of the tour that they brought out Untitled for the first time too. I think one of the last shows in this leg. They were kind of working on it. He was kind of playing around with it. It's cool to hear it, his last kind of pure versions of it. And I love Untitled, and I love MFC, and yeah, it's one of those things that like it could have been so much more, like you said, with I Am Mine, but I think they ended up adding to the beginning of it instead of the end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there have been versions where they've extended it a little bit, but like not a full-fledged jam, but also not in the way that I Am Mine is just like, okay, solo and done. That's straight up every single time. But like MFC at least like is a little bit more open-ended in that facet. This is sort of a theme from this show, but not one that we care to go back on, because it's just whatever. It's ancient history at this point. But they kind of play, Jeremy, but it's got the No Jeremy vibe to it. And Ed is just, singing back and forth with the crowd. The president spoke in court today. on this day is the day that Clinton admitted that he had sexual relations with that woman, and just like, who cares at this point? It was done to death in 1998, and now like going back and being like, what'd you think of the time period? Like, I mean, I was like, what, 12, and I couldn't give a shit. It was just annoying. I just wanted it out of everyday life, like anything in politics that actually doesn't involve political, ramifications.
We've already talked about it too much.
Immortality is next, and the difference between this Immortality and normal versions of Immortality, it just has this long build, this slow, stark, ominous tone to it, and it's a bit plotting in a good way. It's picking its moments in a way where you hear it and you're just like, okay, they're on to something with this. This sounds a little bit different. This is, where a regular version would be more of a creep. This is really a tiptoe. And the solo even, it kind of stays the same pacing the whole entire time. It stays kind of slow, but I don't know if you noticed during the solo, while Mike starts to accelerate, the solo is usually in two pieces. The first piece is usually Mike doing a little bit of a bluesy thing. The second one is where he really goes off. There were 3 in this version. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, there's a really melodic part. It was really good. This Immortality, like, you would have thought you were listening to 1995 Immortality. Like, this does not lose a beat. It's incredible.
Another one that, like, I think this is very cymbal heavy from that, and we talked about the tom heavy stuff with Given to Fly before, but this is very cymbal heavy at the end. And what's really cool, like, they drive and they continue to progress, and it keeps elevating. The vocals at the end elevate, and it just has a great drive to it until the end. But what's nice about this and this version, what I thought was very cool, this kind of had its like final chord, this end stamp on it, instead of just sort of fading out like Immortality usually does. I thought that was kind of cool. It might be a little bit more like rock and roll kind of showy, but I thought that was kind of a cool element for Immortality.
Yeah, I picture them kind of all being around Cameron. Like, we sometimes, you'll see them kind of crowd around the drums and kind of do a little jam thing. I picture that's Cameron leading that, him doing the big thing, like, and stop. Yeah, I wish we had a really good video of this one. We should mention too, there's video of some of the show, but it's very dark. It's off to the side. I think the person was probably didn't want to hold the camera up too high, so didn't want to get caught, so you only get bits and pieces of the band through the crowd and through the other things that are in the way, but you only get a little bit of the beginning and a little bit of the end. But this one is, this one's going to pop back up at the end in my top 3 for sure.
And Ed acknowledges Matt afterwards, and that is always a good sign, because I think that is Ed outwardly saying how thankful he is for Matt existing and being the one to replace him. And of course, going into Even Flow, which is always the song that is the one that's going to trigger the acknowledgement, which is just kind of probably preparing for another one of those. Solo on this.
Speaking of multi-part solos.
Oh yeah, going from Funkadelic to Van Halen, this was all over the place. This is kind of nuts. How do you break it down?
Yeah, you're listening to it and you're kind of like, okay, it's Even Flow solo, Mike, going for it, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, he turns on a pedal or something, and it gets super reverby and super funky, and it was kind of a hard left turn in the middle of this thing. It was very kind of jarring.
Out of all that, they kind of sit on it for a second and then sort of wait on the build. And I thought that was really good. Kind of at the time, it felt like that section wasn't really elaborated on too much. It was just kind of like solo and let's get back into the chorus. But it felt like they just kind of took a second. They were just like, fuck it. Let's build a little bit of tension. And there was a big ending on it too. Really good audible Never Vote Republican on there.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Speaking of, all the stuff we talked about with the Clinton stuff, he was going to throw that in there.
Of course, yep. All right, the next one is for all the poor people in the back. If I were young and at this show, I probably would have been right there, but snuck down and probably makes a pointing gesture too about right there. That sounds about right, but
Did you hear the fan? Did you hear the fan on the bootleg?
I don't know if I heard. I might have.
There's after he says, "This one's for the poor people in the back." You hear someone goes, "Same price, buddy. This sucks."
That's hilarious. I didn't catch that the first time around, and
it's very audible on the bootleg. It must have been standing right next to the guy with the microphone.
Wow, that's classic kind of, and Ed probably never heard it. It's just one of those things.
Not a chance.
It just picked up. Wow.
Yeah,
that's very cool. That takes you in a section which, you could package the 4 of them together, but kind of there will be focus on individual ones here. Nothing Man, Rearview Mirror, Wishlist, In Hiding. I think that the 2 to spot out are Rearview Mirror and then a little bit of Wishlist, but I think In Hiding does deserve a little bit of mention too. Rearview Mirror being basically in the daughter spot, I was really intrigued by. And after Nothing Man, where Nothing Man kind of is that territory of the come down from Even Flow and building back the wave, with Rearview Mirror, you're just so used to it closing a show, or even in some aspects very rarely opening a show, that in the middle of a set you're thrown off by it a little bit, and going into Wishlist on paper seems really odd and really weird. It's its own wave, essentially.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in '94 at Rearview Mirror, they were playing it really early a lot. And here it was starting to kind of creep back towards the back. And, they were still playing it mid-set a lot. It hadn't kind of gravitated towards the end of the set yet, but it's always going to be a highlight whenever you get it. This has he does the kind of slow intro, and it gets really, really quiet. But just like Immortality, just like Corduroy, the ending, oh my God, you're just like, oh, okay, Matt Cameron's, he's the guy now. He's on it. This ending is spectacular.
Charged up, and it's really just fast strumming from all areas here. The guitars are excellent. Also, kind of in the way where it gets its own spotlight. When it closes a show, you can kind of put it in that pocket a little bit, but when it's in this spot, it almost, and this is kind of hindsight, but it almost gets its own little showcase where, afterwards you're so used to okay, let's take a break from this, but shit, there's more set list. There's 5 more songs to go.
Right.
And I think that's such a great indicator of, the energy that they had on stage was just continuing to pop that vibe. Let's get another energetic one, slow it down a little bit, and build back up. What's going to be the last 3 songs of the set are going to be all pretty heavy and pretty charged up. So, yeah, River Mirror was great. I got a little bit on Wishlist here, and very just like tight. It feels like that was a song that they were all in sync on at the time, and not just that, but of course, when you talk about this song, you think about the ending and you think about how they're going to finish off, and it sounds like they're done, but this is almost like a little bit of a Wishlist reprise here.
Yeah, you can hear on the studio version, that really quiet where he goes, "I wish I was a radio song," the one that you turn on, kind of like giving a little hint, like we kind of want this one to be a hit. We wouldn't mind if this one got played on the radio a little bit. We feel like this one could be a popular song. And they never really did that live, but here it kind of gets the treatment. Like they keep it going. They bring it down and then they bring it back, and you get the radio song line. Get the full band treatment. Like it's pretty cool. It's like a real ending. It would kind of like setting the stage for those tags that they would start throwing on it. And yeah, I love 1998 Wishlist. It's one of my favorites from this tour.
Another yield back-to-back with this is In Hiding, and we don't talk about In Hiding too often, which is a damn shame, but in 1988 that song was sort of a secondary focus when you think of the tier list of yield songs that they were really working on. The top 4 are Wishlist, Evolution, Brain of J, Given a Fly, and then the second tier songs like Faithful and In Hiding, MFC would be in the second tier, and then the bottom tier would be just Push Me, Pull Me, All Those Yesterdays, which and No Way, which they would almost never play. Right, but they would just never play those. But like the mid tier ones are always interesting because you think towards now and what they do with the song now, it's kind of more of a stadium rock song. But here you get elements that it's just got like a raw progressional, raw vibe to it, and it's just fun. Like it's a good song that doesn't pop up too often. They've only played it probably sub 100 times. They played
90,
it 92. Yeah, it feels like almost nothing, but this is one that I caught from the crowd. But there was somebody in the crowd right before they go into the da-na-na, and he said, "I'm tripping." So I wonder if, and that is really that's a later thing. That was a later Pearl Jam thing where Ed would in that section say, "I was tripping balls" or something like that.
Yeah,
and he does say something like I was high as hell, or he says something, and that it was kind of unintelligible. But the fan blurts out, "I'm tripping." I wonder what show he had done that at. He had said that. It was that I don't remember In Hiding being played at the Melbourne show. Was there another show that was kind of popularized where he did that earlier in that tour?
Did they do this at the Monkey Wrench? Did they play it at Monkey Wrench?
Yeah, they probably did. I don't remember him doing that though.
Yeah, I don't know. We might need to do an evolution on this one.
Yeah, but that's the thing that it changes and it feels like it's a fuller rock song.
It's Ed, right? Ed can't hit these. He can't do the high notes anymore. But it's great to hear it, and it's great to hear it in this form when he's just like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, like he's just on top of everything, and it sounds fucking great. it would not sound like this in the 2000s and the 2010s.
No, but I think more of in like a song structure standpoint, you still hear those guitars kind of weaving in and out and kind of getting kind of a little bit of the dueling guitar at the end there. Like the guitar is really a backing vocal in this song when you think about it, and it just does Stone tremendous job. Like this is a top tier Stone level song. So like what he's doing on this song just is another voice with this that you can almost say is sort of singing along with Ed.
Very lyrical. Yeah.
Right. And this is always one when they play it in South America too, where Ed has to do that little, that little chime because the crowd, this is not a hit song for them. So maybe they're not singing along as much to this one, but great song. I thought this was a pretty good version here too. But you're hitting on the end here, and the way that you started the main set, you scorched. You went right out of the gate with fire. You're going to finish with fire here. You're going to go spin a black circle, alive, and then go. I think the most interesting thing about all of this is that they're not closing with alive and that they're letting that be a penultimate. I think that was sort of experimental, but also that's great because I've seen other bands do that with their big song, and you can even say that alive doesn't close shows. This is preparing for this to be almost penultimate nowadays, where it's the penultimate to Rockin' in Free World / Ledbetter. But being the second to last song before a go, there's something really unique about that. There's something that just charges you up just a little bit more, that you get this anthemic rocker, and then you think, okay, of course, this is going to be how they finish it. But they're like, no, let's play one of the fastest versions of Go we have in our catalog.
Oh yeah, it just rips, and like it's back to those waves, right? It's like Alive is like hits the height of the wave before it all comes crashing down, right? It's the very last bill where you really push it before you just go in hard at the end. And oh yeah, this last three is great. I mean, I talked about there's the Matt drum roll at the beginning of Hail Hail that kind of leads into it. And there's one in Spin the Black Circle as well that you're just like, oh my god, just chaos, like in a good way. Like it just sounds just fast and furious. And yeah, I like this. You go with Live and you get everyone on this high, and then you just punch them in the face with Go, and then drop the mic and get out.
It's funny with Alive, and I get it from this version. I get that feel that in 95, 96, they seemed to be done with it, and they wanted to move on from it. But now that Cameron's in the band, it feels like there's a renewed energy for the song. Like you listen to Cameron on this, and this is an anthemic Cameron heavy hitting type song. And like Ed's doing the sarcastic, of course there is, and really in the pantheon that doesn't really come until later. That isn't a thing that gets noticed probably until the 11/6/2000 show, and then after that it's every night. But that is a precursor, and that's showing you that Ed is having fun with it again.
Yeah, he definitely didn't sound over it or depressed like he does sometimes in 94, 95, 96. It definitely like felt rejuvenated with Cameron. Yeah, I 100% agree.
Apparently Ed was balancing on Bouncer Pete's shoulders and grabbed a bunch of hands down in front during this, and it was running across the stage doing the same thing. That's not something that you really see from the video, but that is that is a direct quote from Five Horizons. So and then afterwards Ed compliments the crowd on good singing, and that's where you get him to Go, and that speedy, like almost like the Spin a Black Circle speed on Go, which when you think about it, it's a fast song, but it kind of builds to its speed. It just felt like this is just fast from the get-go and fast to the finish, like sprint style.
Yeah, and I love when this one closes the set, because it's like full force, go, and then done. We've done a couple where they kind of do like a big ending to it when it's at the end of a set, but like just rip it and get out. I love that.
That's kind of the same thing that Do the Evolution has sometimes, where it just just ends, boom, done, off the stage and out. Very, very good. But we're at the encore here. Let's pause for station identification. We don't have many songs left in this show, so we could kind of talk a little bit here. And look, we usually take this time to talk about Patreon. We could talk about other things, though. We could talk about Brother the Cloud if we wanted to. Did you like it? What did you think?
I went into it with an open mind. I was not expecting to be blown away or anything, but I didn't mind it. I thought it was fine. That definitely the best of the three that we've heard so far. It's definitely got that kind of vulnerability that Ed can bring to a song like that. You know, it's obviously about something very personal to him. It had a couple of twists and turns, kind of makes you perk up your ears a couple of times, and yeah, I liked it.
Yeah,
Didn't love it, but I liked it.
yeah, I think that on like a backspace or a lightning bolt, it's probably the fourth or fifth best song, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think yeah, it's definitely the best of the three. And they're time and time again, I'm going to see flaws in songs, and I'm just going to pick and nitpick at things. And there were things that I wanted to nitpick at here, but in the end, in reality, it was all just a fun song. And when I
Yeah.
think of Ed's songwriting ability, I usually give him a lot of credit for not directing it at the obvious. And this was a direct song where he's just stating the facts instead of kind of guiding you into what you might build upon to be whatever conclusion you come up with. That wasn't this. I think that's very rare in Ed songs, and maybe that's something that he nowadays will save for Pearl Jam, and then for his stuff kind of be a little bit more forthcoming.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people get turned off by the Ed Solo stuff because it's not Pearl Jam, and they want him to do more Pearl Jam stuff on his solo stuff, but that's not what this is for. You know, it's a different thing, and he's kind of going off, and you know we'll see what the rest of this album sounds like, but it sounds like he's definitely paying tribute to some of his heroes on this record, and
Including his father.
yeah, exactly. And these songs weren't written to be Pearl Jam songs. They were written to be Ed Solo songs. So you gotta kind of compartmentalize that in your head and be like, yeah, this is just something different. And it doesn't sound like Gigaton. It probably it wasn't meant to be on that record. It wasn't meant to be on a Pearl Jam record. So just enjoy it for what it is. He's making music. He was productive at home, sitting around like the rest of us were for a long time. It kind of made me, when when that record comes out, I'll sit down and give it a listen. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what it's got in store.
Speaking of productive, I mean, Stone is just running laps around everybody here with another Painted Shield album that's coming
How
out.
about that? How about that?
I didn't get to listen to the new song yet, but I mean, like, I'm just always impressed by pretty much everything he does. So
Sure, sure.
I'm excited to hear. I love the first album. I love it. It's got such a warm vibe to it, and I think Stone usually writes stuff for the intention of it being a Pearl Jam song. And it's just interesting to go back and listen to these and say, like, what could this have sounded like if this was meant for Ed and the guys?
Yeah, I haven't really sat down and spent a lot of time with that record, but I need to.
It's really good. It's really
Yeah,
good. It's different. It fits kind of like what Stone is doing now rather than what Stone was doing back in the 90s or so. So
sure, sure.
definitely something if you guys haven't listened to.
I'm still digging into that Amen record.
Hey, I haven't listened to that, so I mean we
Yeah,
could
it's
switch
good.
off.
It's good.
We could trade off if we wanted to, but all right, let's get into our own little thing. And obviously, at this point in the show, and there are going to be, what, 5 songs left. So there's not a lot of talking about the songs left. So, we had time to bullshit about things. How about that? If you want to help us out, we are still going and thriving over on Patreon. And this past week, we released a new episode in our late night series, VMAs 1993, where we got to talk about The Animal and the Rockin' in the Free World performance with Neil Young. So that was very good. And look, there are things, and we're not going to put something out every single week for Patreon, but there are things that you literally, if you sign up now, you can listen to our whole entire archive that we've been working on for legit 4 years. Everything is there, from all the Evolution episodes to all the Bridge School series that we did. We did 18 episodes of just Bridge School shows, and not just like we did an Ed Bridge School show too. Like all of them are there. A lot of just extra show content, like shows that we haven't done on the regular platform before, but we did like the Piss Bottle Men second night on the regular platform, we did the first night on Patreon. That's there. The Red Rocks first night on Patreon. The Bogart Show from Cincinnati in 1992, there. Cow Palace, New Year's Eve 1991, that's there. There's a lot of cool stuff that we don't get the opportunity to do on the main platform that we've been just trying to take the opportunity to do there, and we like it because it's stuff that we enjoy talking about. So we hope that you guys are enjoying listening to it. And look, I know, like I mentioned, it's a big archive now and it might be tough to dig through that. So if you're ever looking for something, and maybe we'll at some point do this big list of what's on Patreon and we'll post it somewhere, and maybe just to Patreon for those people that are interested. But it is tough to find things there. However, they're all attainable. Patreon.com/Live on Four Legs, or what you can do is you can download the Patreon app and just search for Live on Four Legs, or you can join by going to liveonfourlegs.com and clicking literally everywhere on the site that says become a patron, and there you go, there you have it. And this episode is strictly a requested episode from a longtime patron, Jeremy, which now join up to the $5 tier, to the $10 tier. And hey, if you join up to the $1 tier and you make it for a full year, we'll give you that episode request. And we're still waiting on people that have been with us for a long time that have an episode request that is owed to them. And hopefully we can get it in 2022. If we can't, then I would say at this point, it's pretty clear that we're going to get to it in 2023. But if you want to help out the show and what we're doing, just head on over there. There's fun stuff. And again, what we like to do is we like to talk about your memories and make sure that since you're giving a little bit of something to us, we get to kind of dig into a little bit of your life. So it's cool for us if it's cool for you.
Yeah, I just love getting these stories. You know, hearing people's first show or why Pearl Jam became their favorite band. It's like that makes our job so much easier.
Yep, 100%. So patreon.com/Live on Four Legs. And if you're not following us on the social media accounts, there's always Twitter. We're very active on Twitter. We do a lot of stuff over there at Live on Four Legs Pod. There's the podcast community group on Facebook, which is just Pearl Jam Podcast Community Group, where you can see updates on what we're doing, updates on what Brandon's doing with Better Band, updates on what State of Love and Trust is doing, and also updates on some of the other community things. And there's always good things. Right now, if you see every single day, I've been polling people on their favorite shows from certain years. We are getting to something with that. We're at this point probably on 2011 or so, but you know, hang on, we are getting to something with that. It'll go to basically an episode where the fans will get to pick what the episode is based on this whole whatever tournament that we're doing. So yeah, Tournament of Champions. So all right, back to the rock. Ed says, on behalf of us and Iggy Pop, thank you so much for coming out. The last time we played here was with Soundgarden a long time ago. I'm going to guess probably Lollapalooza.
Probably.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. We have some song requests in front. Ed says, all right, Hunger Strike, Chris ain't here yet. You haven't figured that one out yet. Need to download that off Napster.
I love that someone requested you. Yeah, that's great.
I mean, this is the time. Like,
that would have been me. I would have been like, yeah, play You. That song's awesome.
People were bringing their signs, and obviously that's how Breath would gain this momentum and gain this. But it's also how Hard to Imagine came back, too. That was another one at the time. They were starting to see a lot of signs for Hard to Imagine in the crowd, and they were just like, okay. Yeah, it was shortly after Chicago Cab came out, a year before this. So it was on people's minds and people wanted it, and they were starting to come along with that and say, you know what? Okay, if you want it, we'll give it a shot. And if it sucks, we won't go back to it. But if it's great, we'll start to make it part of our catalog. And You, not quite yet. I think that came along in 2000. That started to come along.
Yeah.
There's also a sign that says Ed Lewinsky. And Ed says, I don't know what that means. That over there, that's my intern. After the show, interns don't get paid. They just do it for experience. And said, somebody spoke on TV tonight, and he wants to cue up some of the courtroom processions from earlier that day where Clinton had sexual relations with that woman. Who cares? And then he recites the whole entire speech verbatim, and at the end, he says, I only have one word to say, and that's consensual. So it's fucking ancient history at this point. Politics have gotten so much worse than what this is. And think about people that freaked out about that then. Same people that should be freaking out about way more now. So moving on, Better Man is dedicated to both Bill and Hillary. Changes some of the pronouns here to we need him, we feed him. There's the section at the end in the tag for Save It For Later. There's no typical don't let me down, but he's kind of singing, don't let me down, that's all I ask of you, do what you have to do, don't let me down. And that gets pretty intense.
He's thinking about the president at that point. He's singing directly to Clinton at that point, I think.
For sure, and that's at the end. He clearly states like that one was for Hillary, so that's on his mind. And then that goes into Daughter, which again, getting into tag territory with Daughter. This was experimental, but nothing really specific about it at all.
Just some chanting,
a little bit, but overall performance was fine. Didn't rock my world when it comes to Daughter.
Sure. Yeah, it didn't have an anchor of something to go back to kind of give it some weight. It just kind of meandered, I thought.
Yeah, that's fair to say that. Ed afterwards says, "There's no stars in the sky tonight. They're all in the audience. Give yourselves a hand. It's nice to see so many humans right before they were killed by progress. It's evolution, baby." And we're now back to the defining sound of this night after two kind of more poppy anthemic songs, evolution type songs, and leaving here fast, fun, rockin', energetic stuff is what this show should be remembered for. And you hear some bursts here, coming out of the first Stone solo section. There felt like there was something a little extra on it. There's just a sound burst at the end. There's after the other solo, the main solo, there's another great sound burst. And Ed is just on point with all the howls and growls. Very, very good stuff. Obviously, this is the time that you want the best versions to do the evolution. You could say maybe it's a little watered down in comparison now, but they just do it differently in order to keep Ed's voice intact. But then, it doesn't matter. This is song number, 19, 20 of the night. Do whatever they want, first minute of the tour.
We hadn't mentioned Matt Cameron in 10 minutes, so I'm going to go back and do that again.
Oh no, how dare we?
I know, it's just Stone and Matt sounding just locked in together, and at times they did not sound like that over the summer in the first leg, but again, you can tell that they're on top of this and just hitting every single twist and turn of it. And yeah, Stone sounds amazing. I can just picture Stone looking at Matt and just being like, yeah, we got something here.
Right.
Just like he did with Ed, and it felt like they're building that confidence and building that, letting that energy go and just sending it into the stratosphere. Yeah, great version here.
Do you know when the moment was where it was officially official that Matt was in Pearl Jam and not just a replacement member?
After that 98 summer, this is on page 204. The show's in West Palm Beach. He says, after that 98 summer tour, they offered me the job, and I was just like, let's do it.
Boom. There you have it. After the shows where Rancid opened up for them. We were talking about that before we went on air. I wish I could have been at those shows. Rancid opening up for Pearl Jam. How about that?
Yeah.
Rancid also opening up for the Beastie Boys, you told me.
That's right. Yeah, in Atlanta the day after Pearl Jam played.
Ridiculous. And I'm gonna talk real quick and mention that the next one, recorded by The Who before they were The Who, when they were the High Numbers, and it's about the treatment of women. It's called Leaving Here, and that's what we're about to do. And this one is absolutely a nod to what happened, the Hillary Lewinsky stuff. So, fun version. I have the solos marked down as Stone, Mike, Ed, Mike.
I had Mike, Stone, Ed, Mike, but the first two, it could go either way. I think he might be right on that one if you really went for it. But I go back to, like, I'm glad that Jeremy kind of highlighted this one on his note about it, because yeah, I love 1998 Leaving Here. These early versions of the song, like before it got real sloppy, just sounds really good. And trying to figure out the solos is fun, and it's just a great way to kind of like bring a show to a close.
Yeah, and the one thing I'm just thinking about at this time period, and Pearl Jam is always known for being a champion for women's rights, and you think about what music was happening in 1998 and like what media and culture was like in 1998. Think about all like the MTV shows that were out there and how men treated women on
very
those shows.
misogynistic. Yeah,
right. Jerry Springer. Think about like the shit that was going down and how women were treated on that show. And then you think about like a band like Limp Bizkit and their treatment of women, and it's good to sort of show that 25 years later, Pearl Jam was on the side of history that everybody realized that was the right side of history, where the Limp Bizkit side was really just the phase and what was happening back then. It was just supposed to be edgy, but it was really kind of junk. But everybody sort of thought that was going to be the world going forward, that it wasn't going to matter anymore. But it's a good thing that it did, because Pearl Jam, one of the few to be on the right side of history with that and being a champion for those sort of things. So to close out the 4-song encore here, and with a profound statement, behave like rock stars and not like the president, then they're going to leave real quick, come back for a nice version of Ledbetter, and that's going to be the show. Ledbetter was a big deal, and I think at this time, Ledbetter was probably a lot of people's favorite Pearl Jam song, and the one that it's getting so much exposure live, and especially in the closing role, that everybody is expecting for it to be this moment that closes the show.
And on the radio too. By this point, it definitely picked up some radio play. Yeah, it just sounds relaxed and confident. Another thing, like, that's the beginning of this tour just sounds so much different from those early Cameron shows where they sound like a machine, and that's due to Matt Cameron.
On that note, the last leg of 1998 is off to a great start. This is a very good tour, and I think that these shows especially are the ones that stand out from the past. And look, Australia absolutely stands out too, because that's Jack, and that's something different, but that's tough to compare what Matt was doing in his time period with the first half of him being in Pearl Jam, and this is setting the tone for everything that's to come, and wonderfully at that point. We are at our top 3 moments. Look, I'm going to propose this. I want to do my top 3 first whenever I pick my rating first, because what I've noticed is that when you pick your 3 and I'm like, I know I was going to have that song in my 3, I sort of readjust to give other songs their due. So I want to feel confident about my picks, and know that I have like the 3 that I really feel like were the top moments from this show. So I'm going to go number 3. I'm going to say Alive. And I think that you just feel the energy off of it, and you feel that Alive is getting a resurgence, that the band feels better about it. Ed especially, he's the one that's always had the problem with it. Obviously being the radio song, the song that kind of propelled them to bigger heights and bigger things. But Ed seems to want to play it at this point, and it really stems off of what Matt was doing from it. And this version is just very, very good, and sort of leading to what would be good versions of Alive in 1998. For number 2, I'm going to combine 3 together, and I'm going to say that intro 3 songs of Hail Hail, Brain of J, and Last Exit, those are 3 of my favorite Pearl Jam songs of all time. I love the fast ones, and there's no better way to begin a show. That's just perfect, great. Ed's in full force with his voice. Matt sounds terrific. Mike sounds terrific. Unbelievable. But my number 1 is Immortality, and I have a feeling you're bringing back this one too, which hey, maybe I wanted to be the first to mention it. And this just something. Look, Immortality is the one where like the canvas is usually wide open. They can do something on one night, and it could have the intro that's a bit melodic, and it could be like a 5-minute jam at the end. They could do something totally different the next time where it's a little bit more bluesy, but this version is something I hadn't heard before. Just slower, kind of takes a different undertone, and very, very good.
Yes, I 100% agree. My number 3 is Wishlist. I like the little, hint of a tag with the radio song outro. I thought that was a nice touch, and kind of they would just go on to build on it from there. My number 2 is Corduroy. We talked a lot about Corduroy, and talked about how that was one where when Matt just comes in, it's just like you almost get chills, like, oh, here we go. And just a fantastic version. And then, my number 1 is, I'm right with you, Immortality, for all the reasons we talked about.
That's why I wanted to say it first, because I wanted to cement it as my number 1. And sometimes I'll say it as my number 2 just to be like, screw it, I want to be different. But no, it's my number 1 too, and that's okay. All right, now we're on to a rating, and due to Hall of Fame rules, it's an odd number week, so I guess that I'm to go first. And I'm going to give this show a very solid 8. I think it's a good start to a good leg of 1998. It's not one from, I think we talked a little bit about in our circles, we talked about Birmingham and Mansfield lately and how good those shows were. It's not up in that upper tier like that, but it's very, very solid, and it's one that should be looked upon if you want something just easy listening, that you can go through this in less than 2 hours and hear some of the Yield songs in their earliest point and not hear a show that has any meandering. It's not sloppy in any points. There's not a lot of Ed speaking aside from his imitating the president. There's not much of that. So it's just very super focused and Loctite, and it's just a very solid 8 show.
Okay. Yeah, I was torn on this one a little bit because like the Clinton stuff makes it very dated, and like you're listening to it and it almost like kind of takes you out of it a little bit. Like, oh, okay, that was a thing that happened. You're not able to get kind of lost in the vibe of the show and the flow of the show like you sometimes are. But still, very, very good show. And I'll even add, historically being the first night of that leg, and we, all the Cameron stuff we talked about, I think this show is more important than people give it credit for, just for building confidence. And, having a really strong first night of tour just builds on everything that happened later on. So I'm going to give this one a 9.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. And
I think it's important.
And you've been listening the whole time, so you kind of heard some of these songs and how they sounded. It's not the most perfect boot in the world. We've heard better from 1998. We've heard better from 1994.
We've heard worse.
Right, but we've heard worse. So if this was one that we had an official recording of, I wonder how it would translate. I wonder how we would kind of correlate what Matt was doing with some of the things that Stone and Mike were doing differently. Because you get that fuller sound.
We didn't really talk about sound. Jeff. The bass is not as prominent as it normally is. So
it almost never is in these eras, unfortunately. But But good show, and I'm glad. And this is like a perfect example of a show that is just not on either of our radars. That just bring it up, and we're like, okay, jump right in. I think some of the shows that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, I don't think a lot of those were on our radars at all. Like the what we're doing next week, I think I had heard on Sirius at one point, but it's not one that I thought about. Okay, I really got to dig into it. But now, like, yeah, okay, bring it on. We're gonna do it. We're doing Berlin 2009 next week. That was another Patreon request from, I believe, Vanessa, and she's been with us on Patreon for a while now. So we thank her, and we hopefully get to tell her story next week. So very excited. And once again, a big thank you goes out to Jeremy Curtis for sending in his story and letting us tell his story this week. That was great stuff. And I think we can all relate to that moment that we recognize Pearl Jam being our band that we wanted to just fall in love with. So yeah, that's the most important part about doing it all is that you guys get to relive a little bit of it. So there you have it. Hey, look, you know what to do. If you listen to the show weekly, you subscribe to the show, hopefully, Spotify, Apple, or hey, maybe you go on liveonfourlegs.com and you click the link on the banner that has this show up and you just listen to it straight from the website. You can listen to it however you like. I don't care. It gets us the numbers and it gets the great content in your ears. And if you're listening, there's always a way that it can be more visible to the people that love Pearl Jam that maybe at one point you didn't know that we existed, had to find us somehow. There are going to be other people out there that are going to be like, where's the show been all my life? We want to get out to them because hopefully we'll be able to tell a story from their memories as well. And the way that we get to do that is by getting some 5-star ratings on both Apple and Spotify. If you can spot us one of those, that would be huge, and much gratitude towards that. And look, and if you can prove it, if you want to take a screenshot, prove it. And if you're in the U.S., if you're U.S. based, take a screenshot, prove it, send us the photo, and we'll send you a little sticker pack as a thank you for that. We've been doing that for some people that were nice enough to do that. But make sure on Apple, 5 stars and a comment. That's always huge for people to go through the comments and be like, this is what people love about the show. That's phenomenal. And thank you for everybody that have done that and allowed us that privilege to be on the front part of searching for Pearl Jam in the podcast section. So very, very cool. And yeah, that's it. Follow the social media accounts like I mentioned before. Live on Four Legs Pod on Twitter, Live on Four Legs Podcast on Instagram. Don't do much over there, but we're still there. And Pearl Jam Podcast Community Group on Facebook. And then, if you're done with all that, head on over to Patreon maybe. Spend $1 a month to listen to some great content, or just keep listening on this platform. That's okay too. We got more great stuff coming on here in the next coming weeks. Like next week, Berlin 2009. Excited. Definitely excited for it. And we're going to see you there. And I'm out of things to say. So, head into the spiel. This may be the end. We're here, not for much longer. And although we may be parting ways, I miss you already, and I miss you always. It's great going back to 1998. Today won't be the last time we do it this year. We're just getting started with 1998. Very excited for what's to come. Won't you join us next week?
Watch out for praying mantises.
From the front to the back, thanks. Until next time, my guys. Be good. Behave like rock stars, not like the president.